Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to the heart of ancient Rome, not to visit the Colosseum, not to meet the emperor, but for something far more terrifying. Your very first Roman banquet. Yes, you've barely arrived in the city, and already you're being invited to recline in public, speak Latin with your mouth full, and pretend you know what stuffed dormice are supposed to taste like. You may have survived layovers and sandals with no arch support. But trust me, if you don't follow the social rules here, you might not survive dinner. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave me a comment with your city and what time it is where you are. I'd love to know who else is about to eat a rodent in their dreams tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at the Dormice just before sunset, the sky glowing a mellow terracotta that looks suspiciously like every wall in this neighborhood. The host villa is huge, columns, fountains, even a tiny mosaic of a dog barking cave kingdom at your feet. You nod politely at the dog, just in case it's enchanted. You never know with Roman houses. You're greeted not by the host, but by a chain of increasingly elaborately dressed servants. One gestures you toward the atrium, another hands you a small towel scented with something like thyme and crushed grapes. A third gives you a look that seems to say, "Please don't be the guest who drinks the hand-washing water." You step in. The air is warm and heavy with a mix of perfumes, roasted meat, and something vaguely cheese-adjacent. There's music, plucky, uncertain note from a stringed instrument that's trying its best. A man with a harp makes determined eye contact. You pretend not to notice. You've heard stories. This is how poetry happens. And then you see it, the couch, or rather, the couches, 3 of them, forming a U around a low marble table. You were expecting chairs. Rookie mistake. In Rome, elite diners recline to eat. Sitting is for peasants, or worse, senators in meetings. If you're upright at dinner, it had better be because you're serving. A servant pats the cushion beside him. You hesitate. You've practiced your polite Latin phrases all week, but somehow "where should I lay my elbow" wasn't on the list. You flop down sideways, half crumpled, trying to look like you were born lounging. The man next to you raises an eyebrow. First time. You nod. He grins. Don't worry, the Dormice haven't even arrived yet. You laugh politely. You think it's a joke. You hope it's a joke. Just then, another servant approaches, carrying a jug of wine so ornate it probably has its own tax record. He pours it into your cup, careful to splash in a few petals. Rose, saffron. You sip. It tastes like someone tried to make flowers alcoholic and almost succeeded. I recommend pacing yourself. Your neighbor whispers, "The fish course is deceptively spicy." Fish. You look at your empty plate, then at the parade of slaves setting more dishes on the table. There's duck with honey glaze, lentils shaped like tiny coins, a heap of olives that look as though they were marinated in ambition, and still no sign of Dormice. You exhale in relief. Then the host arrives. He's loud, dramatic, and dressed in a toga with more purple stripes than you thought legally possible. He slaps backs, kisses cheeks, says everyone's name wrong on purpose. You try to smile when he reaches you, but the sweat pooling behind your knees is making it hard to be charming. The traveler from the provinces. He booms, "We saved something special for you tonight." Everyone laughs. You don't, because from the corner of your eye, you just saw a silver tray being carried, and on it, a row of perfectly arranged, golden brown, something small, round, a little too familiar. You squint. Are those paws? Your neighbor leans in again. Looks like they brought out the Dormice early. Lucky you. You nod slowly, smile weakly, and wonder if there's a polite way to say "I'm vegetarian" in Latin. Probably not. The servant sets the tray down with the solemnity of someone delivering treasure or a challenge. The Dormice are arranged on a bed of bay leaves, each one plump and golden, their tiny limbs tucked in delicately. like they're taking a nap from which, tragically, they will not awaken. One has been sliced in half to display the filling, a mixture of minced pork, crushed nuts, pepper, honey, and, what is that? Raisins. You didn't expect raisins. Your host beams, our finest dish, straight from Apicius, stuffed dormice, roasted in fig leaves, a delicacy. You nod slowly, trying not to make eye contact with the dormouse looking most accusatory. Someone coughed from across the table. A small part of you hopes it's the ghost of a mouse objecting to this recipe. Historians still argue whether these dormice were everyday snacks or high-end party tricks. What's clear is that you are very much part of the demonstration. Your neighbor takes one, bites in with gusto, and gives you a greasy thumbs up. Tastes like chicken. He says, if the chicken had been marinated in dessert. You reach out politely, lifting the smallest one with your fingers. It's warm, slightly sticky, and smells oddly festive. You bite in. Surprisingly, it's not terrible. There's a faint crunch from the nuts, a sweet glaze from the honey, and a meaty softness that your brain insists isn't ruined. You chew thoughtfully, nodding. You feel like you've passed a test. A chewy, furry test. Good. Yes. Your host calls across the table. You give him a thumbs up and pray that there's no quiz on ancient recipes afterward. As more food arrives, you notice a pattern. Romans love contradiction. Cold dishes with hot sauces, fish soaked in fruit, cheese served with honey. Everything is both one thing and another, all at once. It's like the menu was written by someone doing a culinary philosophy degree. Next comes mortimer garlicky cheese spread served with flatbread that crackles when you break it. Then is isha aumentata, spiced meat patties wrapped in caul fat. Think Roman hamburgers, but greasier, saltier, and somehow more self-important. And yes, more wine, always more wine. By this point, you've accepted that water is a myth. Your cup is refilled every few minutes, often without you noticing, which might explain why you're starting to feel warm, floaty, and okay with the fact that someone just described boiled peacock tongue as delightful. A poet stands up. He begins to recite something that may or may not be about olives. The room quiets. You sip your wine and pretend to understand. The meter is nice. The pronunciation is aggressive. A slave fans the room gently with a large palm frond. Another sprinkles rose petals from above, which land in your wine, your hair, and somehow inside your sandal. You don't know if this is festive or mildly threatening, possibly both. And then, just as you begin to think you might be fuller, at least done with mouse squeezing, a trumpet sounds. Not a metaphorical trumpet, a literal brass trumpet. Everyone sits up. You nearly drop your wine. A pair of servants enter, each holding one side of a tray large enough to host a small constellation. On it, a whole roasted piglet, mouth stuffed with grapes, and whitest than another dormouse. Yes, perched on top like a cherry on a cake. Euphort of garnish. This feels personal. The host claps. Behold, the apex of our feast. Cork within poetic irony. You try not to laugh. You try not to cry. You definitely try not to picture the hierarchy of animals in this dish. As slices are carved and passed around, someone leans in and asks if you'd like to try the brain. You politely pretend you didn't hear. Historians might disagree on how often Romans ate dormice, but they definitely agree that they love to show off. And nothing says power like turning the food chain into a pyramid of appetizers. Your plate is full again. Your cup refilled. Your toga slightly stained. You lean back, loosen your belt discreetly, and stare at the painted ceiling above. There's a tiny fresco of Bacchus riding a chariot pulled by tigers. You envy him. He looks like he knows when to leave a party. Ew. You're still not sure if this is the main course, or just course number 3. You shift slightly on the couch, trying to find a position where your stomach isn't fighting for armrest space. Around you, the feast shows no signs of slowing. A servant walks past balancing a tray of boiled ostrich eggs on his shoulder, like it's just another Tuesday. Someone asks the host whether the eggs were really from ostriches. He laughs and says, "Only the fastest ones." Everyone chuckles. You nod like you understand the joke. You don't. You're pretty sure no one does. That's Roman humor. 30% wordplay, 70% smug delivery. The topic at the table shifts to politics, or philosophy, or both. It's hard to tell. One of the older men launches into a passionate argument about whether moral virtue can be taught. The younger man beside him is halfway through a roasted artichoke and appears to be losing both the debate and his dignity. You, meanwhile, are busy trying to figure out which sauce is garum and which one might be just fishier garum. Garum, the fermented fish sauce of ancient Rome, is everywhere, poured over meat, vegetables, even dates. It smells like regret but tastes oddly addictive, like salty umami with a hint of historical authority. There's some disagreement among modern scholars about just how pervasive garum was. Some argue it was as common as olive oil. Others say it was more of a luxury good. What's clear is that your plate now contains 3 things soaked in it and none of them were meant to be. A slave leans in and offers you a bite-sized pastry. You accept, smiling, until you realize it's filled with fish paste. You chew. You smile harder. You're surviving this with grace, or at least with plausible deniability. Careful. Your neighbor murmurs. That one clears the sinuses. You respond with a polite wheeze. At the far end of the table, the host is in the middle of a toast. He raises his cup and announces a riddle. What is full, yet still hungers? What is silent, yet always heard? Everyone leans in, intrigued. You sip your wine and quietly guess, my stomach. The answer, it turns out, is the city of Rome. The host laughs at his own cleverness. You're not sure if you're supposed to clap. You settle for adjusting your toga, which has shifted again into something less toga and more tangled bedsheet. Then comes the entertainment. 2 acrobats tumble into the dining room, flipping over the mosaic tiles like they were raised on perfectly symmetrical floors. They're followed by a flute player, a girl with a voice like falling petals, and finally a man with a pet monkey. The monkey wears a tiny laurel wreath. He bows. The room applauds. You're not sure whether to be delighted or mildly concerned. The monkey steals someone's fig and runs off. Everyone cheers. The flute player shrugs. Apparently, this is normal. Someone beside you mutters, I miss the simpler, A's bread, cheese, a view of the Tiber. You nod, not because you agree, but because you suspect this is what old Romans say at every banquet, like a script passed down from ancestor to ancestor. Just as the acrobats are wrapping up, dessert begins arriving, but don't be fooled. Roman dessert is not for the faint of heart. First come the candied dates, stuffed with pine nuts and pepper, then the baked pears, glazed with fish sauce and honey eyes. You read that right. Your modern sensibilities quietly excuse themselves. Next, what appears to be cheesecake, but turns out to be made of boiled curds and eggs, topped with poppy seeds. You take a bite. It's like if cheese and pudding had an identity crisis and ended up in a philosophical conversation about sweetness. You reach for your wine to chase it down. It now has violets floating in it. Of course it does. You lean back once more, resting your head on the embroidered cushion behind you. Your stomach is negotiating terms. Your mind drifts to simpler meals: porridge, olives, maybe a small loaf of bread. But that was lunch for commoners. This is spectacle. You open your eyes just in time to see the host toss a golden coin into the air. It lands in someone's cup. Laughter erupts. You have a feeling this night isn't ending anytime soon. At some point, you begin to lose track of how many courses have passed. Time has become more of a suggestion than a measurement. The sun is long gone. The torches on the walls flicker gently, and the air smells like roasted nuts, melted wax, and people pretending not to be full. Someone next to you is explaining the symbolism of pomegranates in Roman poetry. You're not alone. Your mouth politely full of something that might be a turnip tart or a fig pretending to be a turnip tart. In Rome, The line between fruit and vegetable is about as blurry as the line between food and performance art. The host claps again, his voice rising over the murmur of conversation. And now, he announces, the palate cleanser. A collective sigh of relief runs through the room. You brace yourself for something refreshing, maybe mint, a chilled melon slice. Instead, a bowl of lettuce in vinegar is set before you. Just lettuce. Wet, sour lettuce. You take a bite. Your mouth recoils. Your stomach writes an official letter of complaint. Your neighbor grins. They say it aids digestion. You raise an eyebrow. They clearly never had 3 types of fish and a baked cheese loaf in one sitting. It's at this point you notice your couch companion is no longer the same man from earlier. Somewhere between the goose sausages and the fish-shaped pastries, the guests have shifted. You're now beside a woman in a golden stola who seems to be grading everyone's table manners with the intensity of a bored philosopher. She watches a young man across the table pick up a grape with his fingers and gives a dramatic sigh. That one, she says, just dipped his whole hand in the sauce bowl. We are truly in decline. You nod, unsure if you're supposed to agree or apologize on behalf of the Republic. Back in my youth, she continues, we learned to eat grapes with a knife. You glance at your own grape pile and quietly abandon the idea of dessert. The table is now dotted with small theatrical performances. One group debates Virgil's Aeneid with hand gestures and wine splashes. Another is playing a game involving guessing the spice in a dish. Incorrect answers seem to be punished by spontaneous poetry recitation. You do not want to get that wrong. A servant appears with a tray of tiny sculpted pastries birds, stars, maybe dolphins. They're dusted with sugar and filled with fruit. You take one shaped like a snail, mostly because you're curious and slightly delirious. It tastes like cinnamon, citrus, and something vaguely nostalgic, though you've never had this before in your life. Roman confections. Someone nearby says, beautiful and unnecessary, like most of Roman society. That earns a laugh from someone across the room, who lifts their goblet and says, to unnecessary beauty. Everyone drinks. You do, too. You're not sure why anymore, but it seems like the right thing to do. And then, suddenly, silence. A man at the far end of the room is standing, arms wide, toga billowing like he's trying to summon a thunderstorm through fashion alone. It is time, he declares, for the after-dinner entertainment. You're already being entertained by your digestive system's attempts to keep up. But no matter, the lights dim slightly, torches are lowered. Musicians begin a slow, haunting tune. A woman in translucent robe steps into the middle of the room and begins to dance. It's not fast or dramatic. It's slow, fluid, hypnotic. Her hands trace invisible patterns in the air. Her feet barely make a sound on the tiled floor. The room falls into an almost meditative silence, broken only by the occasional clink of a goblet or someone quietly whispering. She's the same dancer from the Saturnalia festival. I think. The music swells, then fades. The dancer bows. Applause follows soft, scattered, satisfied. You realize you're holding your breath. You exhale. Another toast, another bite, another refill. You glance toward the open-air courtyard, where the night breeze carries in the scent of fig trees and faint laughter from distant streets. For a moment, it feels like the city is breathing with you. And though your stomach is full, your heart feels oddly light. Maybe it's the wine. Maybe it's the dormouse. Maybe, just maybe, you're starting to enjoy yourself. Morning in the city doesn't exist yet, but the moonlight's already pulling at the corners of the feast, like a tired servant suggesting everyone wrap it up. And yet no one moves. Not really, because in ancient Rome, banquets aren't so much attended as they are endured. You blink slowly. The pillows around you have shifted in shape, maybe from all your subtle readjusting, maybe from the weight of your own decisions. Somewhere nearby, someone is singing very softly about cabbages. You hope it's metaphorical. It isn't. Just as your body begins to whisper, maybe it's time for bed, Your host raises a finger, not a hand, just one finger. A servant immediately appears with a new tray. Oh no. Oh yes, your neighbor says with a grin. It's the second supper. You look at him as though he's revealed he's a Saturn-worshipping time traveler. Second supper? Apparently. Yes, see, Romans didn't believe in a light meal before bed. They believed in finishing strong, like a chariot race with a cheese wheel at the end. The tray contains what appears to be fried fish heads garnished with dill and a small sauce you're too afraid to identify. They're symbolic, someone says. Of what? Of victory. Of course, you conquered the banquet. Your stomach disagrees. Still, you politely take a bite of the fried fish head. The texture is oddly crunchy, and the flavor reminds you of a very ambitious anchovy. You manage a smile, very Roman, you say, hoping that's a safe phrase in most social contexts. But you're not done yet. The host now gestures toward a servant with a large bronze bowl. You expect soup or possibly a bird. Instead, he produces a dental kit. Time to freshen up. Your neighbor says cheerfully. Yes, in Rome, after dinner hygiene is an event. You're handed a twig, well, technically, a frayed stick of mastic to use as a toothbrush. There's a powdered substance made of charcoal and oyster shell. You dip, you scrub, and try not to cough. It doesn't taste like mint, it tastes like vengeance. Still, it's oddly refreshing. You can't tell if it's the cleaning or just the satisfaction of surviving this long. While everyone's preoccupied with oral hygiene, the host begins a slow monologue, not a toast, not a joke, something between a eulogy and a bedtime story. It's about his father, who once hosted a banquet so grand that Cicero left halfway through and sent a thank you note 2 weeks later. It's a touching story. If you weren't clutching your full belly like it owed you money, you might be more emotional. Banquets, he says, are not just about food. They are about memory, about who remembers you ate with them, and why you not. This is one of those moments when Roman culture suddenly steps off its marble pedestal and becomes surprisingly human. Historians still debate whether Roman feasts were really this extravagant all the time, or if we just keep reading about the wildest ones, because let's face it, they're more fun to write about. But one thing's clear for Romans: food was never just food. It was identity, performance, status, and strangely, comfort. Speaking of comfort, someone passes you a warm cloth scented with lavender. Another servant hands you a cup of watered wine, far gentler than anything you've had all night. You've made it, your neighbor says with a grin. You've officially survived your first Roman banquet. You lean back and let out a soft sigh. Your belt is no longer even pretending to do its job. You feel like a well-fed amphora, ancient, round, and possibly leaking. In the distance, a rooster crows. The host frowns. Someone shut that bird up. We're not done. But you're done. Done in the best way. Done like a story reaching its last page. Like a candle melting to its wick. Like a guest finally reclining, not out of etiquette, but because sleep is winning the argument. The stars overhead blink gently. The marble floor beneath you is cool. The sounds of the feast become a soft, hazy hum in the background. And for the first time since the dormouse stared into your soul, you smile without fear. You're not sure how long you've been lying there. Time doesn't work properly in rooms lit only by flickering oil lamps and fueled by a 1,000-year-old wine recipe. The shadows shift like gossiping senators, quiet, dramatic, always leaning a little too close. A servant tiptoes by with a tray of figs. You don't even blink. You're beyond figs now. You've reached the phase of the evening known, unofficially, as digestive surrender. Around you, conversations begin to soften. People are reclining more horizontally than vertically. There's a general atmosphere of if I move, I might explode. Your toga is no longer neatly arranged. It's become more of a blanket, or possibly a personal negotiation. You try to tuck in the corner that keeps slipping off your shoulder. But give up. You're not here to impress anymore. You're here to survive the cool-down lap of one of the most ambitious meals of your life. To your left, a man is softly singing an ode to olive oil. He's off-key, but deeply committed. His friend nods solemnly after each verse. Is this a ritual? A dare? Historians would argue both possibilities. Your thoughts drift to the dormouse again. Its glazed expression, the stuffing that defied expectations, the way your tableau-mate spoke of it like it was a celebrity, and the strange truth that you didn't hate it. In fact, it might have been the most emotionally honest thing you ate all night. You stare at the empty silver tray across the room where the last one was taken. Gone, vanished, immortalized only in your dreams and possibly your stomach lining. First time eating glares. A voice asks from behind you. You turn and see an older gentleman wrapped in a deep purple toga. He smiles kindly, like someone who's seen to many banquets and survived them all. Yes, you say, I think I passed. He chuckles. If you didn't insult the sauce or spill wine on the host, you did fine. A long pause. Then he adds, the real test is whether you remember any of this tomorrow. Another servant glides in, walking, but truly gliding, as if trained in stealthing a small pot of something steaming. He pours it into shallow clay cups, spice balsam, a hot wine mixed with honey and herbs, a sort of Roman nightcap. You cradle yours carefully. It smells like thyme, cloves, and the kind of warm confidence you wish you'd had when you first Saturday down. This, the older man says, raising his cup, is for sleeping well. You nod. It already feels like it's working. Outside the villa, the night carries on. Somewhere, you hear the sound of a lyre being plucked lazily. A donkey brays far off in the distance, and the occasional call of a city watchman echoes through the streets, reminding people to mind their candles and not walk off the edge of balconies after too much wine. You realize something strange. This city doesn't sleep like modern cities. It slows, it dims, it exhales, but it never really stops. And you're part of it now, a guest in a place where feasting is performance. Sleep is a suggestion, and dormice are not to be underestimated. The older gentleman has fallen asleep sitting up, his cup tilted, his expression peaceful. Someone covers him with a shawl. No one laughs. This, too, is part of the ritual. You take another sip of the spiced wine. It's sweet, earthy, comforting. You realize you haven't heard your name spoken in hours, that it doesn't matter. Tonight, you're not a tourist or a stranger. Tonight, you are simply a diner, a dreamer in a Roman room filled with laughter, oil light, and way too much cheese. You sink deeper into the cushions, the world around you softening into shapes and murmurs, like a painting left out in the rain. Your limbs are heavy, your mind a gentle swirl of flavors, sounds, and stray poetry fragments you didn't even know you'd absorbed. If someone were to ask what time it is, you'd answer, 11 o'clock, and you'd be right. You drift, not asleep, not awake, just somewhere pleasantly in between. A soft Roman blur. The music is stopped, replaced by the quiet sound of clay cups clinking, of sandals shuffling across mosaic floors, of half-whispered Latin murmurs that might be poems or complaints about the anchovies. Someone laughs gently, not the loud I'm still performing kind of laugh, but the kind that slips out when you finally realize you're no longer being watched or judged or expected to pass another roasted rowan test. You look up. The ceiling above you is painted with stars. Not real, honest, these are stylized, idealized, sparkling gold flecks arranged across a deep blue dome. A Roman interpretation of the heavens. Very symmetrical, very confident, historically inaccurate, but who's checking? A servant enters with a bronze censer, waving trails of smoke that smell like cedar and maybe a little rosemary. It floats over the table like a blessing or a polite attempt to mask the collective aroma of 12 people who just ate for animal kingdom's worth of protein. This, says your neighbor, returning from wherever he wandered off to, is the post-coitum ritual. He sits. He looks proud, but also slightly winded. The dinner is over. He explains. But now we talk, philosophize, reflect. You nod. Talking you can do. Eating, Not so much. A guest across the room begins to recite from memory something about virtue, justice, and figs. You miss most of it, but catch the end, and so, the soul must always crave balance. You think about your stomach and silently disagree. The host, lounging now like a contented kid draped in silk, turns toward you. Tell me, he says, what do they feast on in your part of the world? You blink. Your part of the world. You try to remember. Suddenly, it all feels like a myth. Did you ever eat simple bread and cheese under a tree? Did you ever boil lentils without fanfare? Were there truly places where dessert wasn't shaped like a mythical creature? You mutter something about stew. He laughs. The stew. Yes, a good honest stew. We used to have that before everyone decided that appetizer needed a prologue. Another guest joins in. I once attended a banquet where they served a dish that looked like a scroll. You had to unroll it to find the cheese. Someone else snorts. That's nothing. I went to a feast where the table was the meal. You just peeled things off the surface. Edible marble. Terrible idea. The room fills with that easy, wine-soft laughter that only happens when people are full, warm, and no longer concerned with impressing anyone. You lean back again, letting their voices wash over you. You don't catch every word, and that's okay. It's like rain on a tiled roof. Pleasant, rhythmic, expected. Historians still puzzle over the exact structure of Roman dinner parties. Did every elite home follow this pattern, or are we just reading about the wildest ones? Some say this kind of feast was rare. Others insist it was to stay. But one thing's certain for the Romans. Food was only half the meal. The other half, performance, conversation, reputation, and a little bit of theater. You're beginning to understand. As the conversation drifts toward dreams and omens, someone begins interpreting their recent vision of a flaming chicken. Another insists it was symbolic. A third says it was probably indigestion. There's no consensus, but everyone seems satisfied with all three explanations. A quiet flute begins again, barely audible, almost more breath than sound. It drapes the room in a kind of musical curtain. You didn't notice when it started. You're not sure you'll notice when it stops. The host rises, stretches like a lion waking up from a nap, and says, "Friends, it is late. You are fat. You are fragrant. You are forgiven." Everyone chuckles. He bows slightly, and the room seems to release a collective exhale. You look around. Some guests are already curled into their cushions. Others are mumbling farewells. One man is staring into his wine like it contains the future. Ew. You're not ready to move. You've joined a long tradition of travelers who came to Rome seeking knowledge and left with nothing but a very full stomach and a vague sense that they just lived through something nobody will quite believe. And that, somehow, is exactly the point. You're still on the couch. You're almost part of it. Now cushion, toga, body, thought, all merged into one sleepy, well-fed Roman Marcello. The chatter in the dining room has thinned into murmurs and hums. Most of the guests are no longer speaking in sentences, just fragments. An aim here, a proverb there. Someone whispers, "Fortune favors the brave." And you privately think, fortune also favors the well-rested. A servant drapes a light wool shawl across your shoulders. You didn't ask for it. You didn't even see her coming. She simply knew. That's Roman hospitality. Part service, part sorcery. You catch a whiff of frankincense from a nearby incense burner. The scent is soothing, spicy, ancient, like the kind of smell that makes you feel like you're in a temple, even if you're just digesting mouse. A few guests begin slipping out, led gently by staff down side corridors to their rooms or carriages or wherever it is wealthy Romans go to recover from eating their own body weight in stuffed delicacies. You consider leaving too, but your limbs have filed for independence. You're staying, at least for now. The older gentleman from before shuffles over, now with a walking stick shaped like a dolphin. You don't question it. He sits beside you again, nods, and says, "So, did you learn anything?" You pause. You think, "I learned that sleep mice are not just a myth." You say, He chuckles. Dormice. But yes, they're very real, very seasoned. You add, and that one can be completely full and still feel like dessert is a spiritual requirement. That's wrong. He says, moderation in theory, excess in marble. Then he leans in, conspiratorially. Of course, it wasn't always this way in the old days. Feasts were simpler, more rustic, fewer sauces, more virtue. He sighs, or so we like to pretend. He smiles, and you realize this whole city is a performance, and everyone here is both actor and audience, chef and critic, philosopher and poet, sometimes all in the same sentence. You let your head tip back against the cushion. From this angle, you can see the tops of the columns surrounding the atrium, wide, slightly tilted from centuries of architectural pride and questionable maintenance. The moon has shifted across the open skylight above, casting a soft rectangle of silver across the mosaic floor. You trace its edges with your eyes. You try to remember the path that brought you here, the dusty road into the city, the scroll in your satchel, the letter of introduction with a faint wax seal. You plan to study, to observe, to learn, and now here you are, staring at the ceiling of a stranger's house, with a stomach full of ancient cuisine and the faint taste of time still lingering on your tongue. No scroll could have prepared you for this. Someone begins to sing again, not loudly, just a quiet lullaby in Latin, barely audible over the crackling of a torch. It's about a traveler, lost in a foreign land, who finds comfort in a stranger's home. You feel seen. Most guests don't make it this far, the old man murmurs, half asleep himself now. They leave after the second course, or when the fish heads come out. You smile. I almost did, but you stayed. He says, I did. That counts for something. And it does. In this place, in this time, staying until the end of the feast is an unspoken badge of honor, a rite of passage, a slightly ridiculous but deeply human form of acceptance. Outside, you hear a soft breeze rustling through laurel trees. Inside, the torches begin to sputter out, one by one, like stage lights bowing out after the final act. You let your eyes close, not fully asleep, just relaxed, safe, held by the weight of history and cushions and roasted things you never expected to enjoy. You're not sure what time it is anymore. You're not sure it matters. You don't know when you drifted off, but when you open your eyes, the room is different. It's not empty, but it's quieter. The guests are fewer. The shadows are longer. The laughter, now rare and hushed, seems to echo from corners where no one's sitting. A servant tiptoes past, with a stack of folded napkins and a look that says, we're not cleaning up yet, but we're definitely thinking about it. Your neighbor's older gentleman with the dolphin canne is gone. In his place is a pile of precisely folded cushions and a half-full cup of spice wine, still warm. You sit up slowly, like someone re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Everything feels heavier now. Your limbs, your breath, even your thoughts. It's not unpleasant, just dense, like you've been stuffed, metaphorically, just like that dormouse. You notice a young servant boy sweeping up rose petals with a feather fan. He doesn't look up. He's in the zone. You respect that. The last few remaining guests sit in small clusters, not really talking anymore, just existing. Some stare at their cups, others at the fire. One man seems to be whispering to a statue of Minerva in the corner. You choose not to investigate. And then someone begins telling a story. You can't see who. A voice just begins, deep, low, unbothered by time. It's a myth. You think something about a woman who fell in love with a baker who could only bake at night. They meet in secret during his flower breaks. Then there's a goose. Then the moon gets involved. Then a jealous senator. You lose track. But it doesn't matter. It's not about following. It's about floating. The story weaves its way through the room like a slow current, brushing over everyone equally. You realize that this, too, is part of the feast, the final course, the quiet sharing of tales, when the food is gone and all that's left is memory. You let the story wash over you. The woman turns into a tree. The senator becomes a puddle. The goose is forgiven. You love it. Historians often debate how much Roman banquets were about food versus how much they were about narrative control. Was the point to impress with dishes, or to impress with who you were seen dining with, or more subtly to control the conversation? Whatever the truth is, tonight, you feel none of that tension, no social maneuvering, no politics, just stories, and one very determined goose. Your fingers brush the side of your goblet, tracing the faint engraving around the base. It's a vine pattern, very detailed. Someone spent hours on it, possibly days. Maybe this goblet was passed from hand to hand for generations. Maybe this is its first feast. Either way, it's held something warm tonight. You look around once more. The mosaic floor has lost its sharpness. The tiles now seem like brush strokes. The torchlight flickers soft shadows against the columns. The air carries the scent of ash, herbs, and whatever lies in the seams of old cushions. One of the musicians returns it to perform, but to quietly collect his instrument. A long, polished lyre. He cradles it like a sleepy pet and slips away through a curtain. It feels like the end, but also like the beginning of something slower, something deeper. A servant offers you one last item, a tiny sachet of lavender type with a cord. You're not sure what to do with it, so you press it into your palm and nod gratefully. And you realize this is how they say goodnight in Rome. No clock, no signal, just gestures. Lavender, warm cloth, a story that doesn't need a conclusion. Your body sinks back into the cushions. The whispering continues. The room breathes gently. You close your eyes again, and this time, you don't wonder when you wake. You're not quite asleep, but you've stopped blinking regularly. Voices come and go like wind through curtains. You hear your name once a year, maybe it's someone with the same accent. Either way, you don't respond, not out of rudeness, but because responding would require movement, and you are currently one with the cushion. Somewhere near the doorway, a pair of servants are carefully extinguishing torches with long bronze tools. One by one, the flames go out with a tiny sigh. It's like the villa itself is exhaling, slowly undressing from its evening finery. The atrium is now lit only by the dying embers in the brazier and a single well lamp hanging by the statue of Bacchus, who looks as always too pleased with himself. Someone whispers a joke in Latin. You don't catch it, but the rhythm sounds funny. There's a polite chuckle. It fades into stillness. You feel the room shifting into its final phase. This is the time when conversations melt into shared silence, when even Rome decides to give your ears a break. The host, still awake somehow, stands up for what might be the 5th or 50th time tonight. His toga is rumpled, now less emperor, more sleepy uncle. He raises his cup, which has nothing in it, and says, "To the feast, to the friends, and to the foolishness that got us here." Everyone murmurs agreement. You lift your empty hand instinctively. Close enough. He turns to you. His gaze is soft now, the performative sparkle replaced with something more human. You stayed longer than most. You manage a sleepy smile. Hard to leave. He nods. That's how it gets you. And then he's gone, disappearing behind a velvet curtain, possibly turning into mist for all you know. You glance down at the table. The once overflowing platters now hold only crumbs, bits, and the occasional half-bitten fig someone gave up on mid-chew. A battlefield of indulgence. There's a ceramic dish nearby with olive stones arranged in a spiral. A guest's private sculpture. An edible manila? You consider adding to it but can't lift your hand. Your body is too far gone, but your mind is adrift, pleasantly unraveling like a toga being folded by moonlight. You think of everything you've consumed, not just food, but sounds, scents, glances, jokes, the gentle pressure of the wool beneath you, the unexpected kindness of strangers, with spiced wine and questionable hygiene tools. You remember the dormouse, its tiny paws tucked in like it had fallen asleep. You hope, in some small way, that it had. There's still debate among scholars about how much of this is exaggeration. Some argue Roman banquets were more practical than poetic. Others suggest that elite feasts were deliberately over the top to blur the line between civilization and chaos. But here's what the scrolls don't say: how soft it all feels when it's just you, a cushion, and the afterglow of too many raisins. A young woman passes by and gently places a small wooden tray beside you. On it, a warm towel, a shallow dish of rosewater, and a small almond cake shaped like a shell. You smile. She doesn't speak, just nods. You take the towel and press it against your face. It smells like memories you haven't lived yet. You don't eat the cake not because you don't want it, but because looking at it feels enough, like the full stop at the end of a very long, very beautiful sentence. The last musician, just a boy with a reed pipe, plays a few final notes. You think it might be the same melody as before, or maybe it just loops in your head now. You let your eyes close again. You feel no need to get up. You feel no need to understand. You feel full of food, of warmth, of Rome. The moon is lower now. You can tell because the silver rectangle on the floor has shifted again, sliding slowly across the mosaic like a sundial made of sleep. Someone nearby is snoring gently, not obnoxiously, just enough to remind you that you're not alone in your exhaustion. It's oddly comforting, like the distant rumble of thunder when you're already warm in bed. A breeze stirs the curtain at the entrance. It brings with it a whiff of crushed laurel and the faintest scent of city-baked brick. Distant fires, maybe even the Tiber itself, waiting through the night like a tired storyteller. You stir, just a little, not to leave, of course, just to adjust your leg, which has gone numb in a very Roman way. A nearby gas shifts, grumbles softly, and adjusts their own pillow fortress. The whole room is a sea of soft, exhausted shapes. There's no conversation anymore, just the occasional clink of ceramic or the rustle of someone pulling a cloak tighter around their shoulders. You think back to earlier in the evening, when you worried about table etiquette, fork or fingers, speak or sip, eat the dormouse whole or dissect it respectfully. And now you couldn't care less. You're practically horizontal. You're one fig away from becoming part of the furniture. A servant glides past with a brass tray filled with tiny clay charms, miniature amphorae, little carved figs, even a teeny dormouse, their keepsakes, apparently a polite reminder that you were here, that you endured, that you dine with dignity or at least plausible digestion. You're handed a charm without asking. It's a small terracotta amphora, light, warm, perfect for a necklace or a memory. You close your hand around it and hold it against your chest like a secret. Historians would call this part of the night. Post-sunna quiet is quiet after the feast, the moment when the performance ends. The roles dissolve, and everyone becomes human again. No more toasts, no more riddles, no more courses shaped like philosophical metaphors. Just you, the floor, the night, and a stomach full of ancient ambition. The oil lamp on the Bacchus statue finally sputters. It flickers once, twice, then goes out with a soft fsshhh. Darkness deepens, but it doesn't feel scary. It feels gentle, intentional, like the villa itself knows the party's over and is tucking you in. You hear footsteps slow, measured, probably the steward making his final rounds. You half expect him to whisper bedtime proverbs in Latin. You wonder if tomorrow anyone will talk about the feast, if they remember who was there, or which dish won the night, or whether the monkey actually stole the fig, or if it was just a wine-fueled hallucination. You wonder what Romans will remember about nights like this. You wonder if you remember it all, and somehow, all those questions feel perfectly okay to leave unanswered. Because here, in this quiet hour, answers aren't the point. Comfort is. Slowness is. The simple miracle of having eaten, laughed, lounged, and lived, all in one evening. You nestle into your cushion once more. A final whisper brushes the air, maybe someone saying goodnight, or maybe just the wind nudging the heavy curtain aside to let the stars peek in. Either way, you feel it, and you smile. At this point, you're not even sure you're still in your own body. You're part of the cushion, part of the floor, part of the air, a very sleepy fragment of Roman history. The world around you has softened into shapes. Columns become shadows. Statues become silhouettes. The great mosaic under your feet feels less like a floor and more like a quiet river, gently carrying you toward dawn. The last handful of guests are beginning to leave. They don't say goodbye, they just vanish, slipping out with the silence of people who know the city will remember them anyway. Rome always remembers its banquets, even if the guests don't. One of them drops a sandal as they leave. A servant picks it up without a word, places it beside the door like it's a holy offering. You hear someone whispering a prayer to Mercury, possibly for digestion, possibly for forgiveness. You shift a little. Your toga has tangled itself into something resembling a nest. You decide not to fix it. This, you tell yourself, is the Roman way? Another servant appears with wine, not with food, but with a folded wool blanket. She drapes it over you without asking. It smells faintly of lavender and something older, something that feels like sleep. You murmur a thank you, unsure whether she hears or whether you even spoke out loud. Above you, the moonlight flickers against the painted ceiling. A soft breeze moves the hanging curtain, letting in just the faintest sound of water trickling from the courtyard fountain. Drip, drip, drip. It becomes your metronome. You breathe in time with it. The scent of the feast is fading, now replaced by the faint perfume of ashes, extinguished lamps, and the cool stillness that only ancient stone buildings can produce. A kind of peace that modern homes never quite manage. It smells like time itself taking a nap. You close your eyes and imagine the room in daylight. The same floor, the same pillars, the same mosaic dog guarding the intrancheba transformed. No laughter, no togas, just silence and crumbs. Maybe a trail of fig seeds, maybe the echo of a song still hiding in the walls. You wonder how many banquets this room has seen. How many guests have fallen asleep where you're lying now. How many dormice have met their delicious fate under this very roof. A smile tugs at the corner of your mouth. You didn't come here expecting this. You thought you were just here to visit, to learn, maybe to scribble a few notes into a scroll about Roman etiquette and overcooked pigeons. But instead, you were fed, truly fed, not just your body, but your sense of wonder, your sense of slowness, your sense that maybe, just maybe, it's okay to lie back, loosen your belt, and let the ancient world hold you like a very polite, very perfumed blanket. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster tries to announce the coming day. It's far off, muffled, like it's unsure whether it's time yet. You're not ready to move, not even to think. Your body is soft, your mind is quieter than it's been in weeks. And if this is what the Romans called digestion, that long, slow post-feast phase when you do nothing but let your existence settle gently into itself, then yes, you are deeply, fully, historically digesting. You begin to forget where the feast ended and where the silence began. It all melds together now. The taste of honeyed wine, the sleepy weight of wool on your shoulders, the gentle squeak of sandals on polished stone. Everything is slow. Everything is soft. You shift just enough to let your cheek rest fully on the cushion. It's warm, faintly scented with rosemary, and carries the memory of thousands of heads that must have danced here before you. You're joining a long tradition not just of eating, but of drifting. A single candle remains lit near the far end of the room. It flickers with theatrical flair, casting the shadows of statues onto the walls in slow, elongated dances. You watch as a bust of Cicero becomes a lion, a lyre becomes a laurel wreath, your hand becomes a mountain. Nothing is entirely itself anymore. This is what the Romans called luxurious, not just luxury, but a kind of indulgent stillness, a moment stretched so far beyond necessity that it becomes art. You're beginning to understand why they built their empire on such things. A servant passes by quietly, adjusting a curtain to block the breeze now that the night has cooled. She pauses only for a second, to make sure you're still breathing, perhaps to confirm you haven't slipped into a food-induced coma. You give her a sleepy blink to assure her that yes, you're still here. but only just. The few remaining guests have found their own versions of comfort. One is curled up against a column like a cat. Another has propped their feet on an overturned amphora, snoring softly. No one judges. In this room, sleep is not failure, it's a reward. You remember a phrase your tutor once told you when in Rome. Recline. You thought it was a joke. Now you understand it was survival advice. Someone nearby hums a tune, just a few notes, familiar and vague, like something your grandmother might have sung in a language that never made it into the history books. The melody floats for a moment, then disappears into the plastered ceiling. Your hand rests on your stomach, which is no longer protesting, but simply radiating a quiet sense of we did. A victorious, if slightly confused, contentment. Your other hand still holds the tiny amphora charm from earlier. You run your thumb over its surface slowly. It's smooth, slightly cool, a pocket-sized memory of a night no one would believe if you tried to describe it. You feel yourself slipping again, not into sleep exactly, more like into a softer layer of wakefulness. Like you're floating above the room, watching the scene play out in watercolor. And in this version, the mosaics shimmer with gold. The columns bend like tree trunks in the breeze. The walls whisper Latin lullabies. And you're still there in the corner, toga bunched, face slack, mouth slightly open, but somehow, you're also everywhere. You're in the spice dishes. You're in the stories. You're in the warm air between candle and cushion. And none of it feels strange. Historians write about feasts as if they were calendars, records of alliances, betrayals, tax receipts disguised as dinners. But no one writes about this part, la blur, the warmth, the weird little moment when you realize a Dormice dinner brought you closer to peace than any philosophy scroll ever did. You sigh, long and slow, not out of discomfort, but because your body needs something to do while your mind slowly evaporates into history. Outside, a bell rings faintly, probably from a temple or a bakery, or both. Romans didn't always draw clear lines between sacred and sourdough. You smile at the thought, and with that, your eyes drift closed again in escape, but in surrender. It's not clear when morning arrives. It doesn't burst in. It seeps like steam from a bathhouse, like honey into warm bread. A gentle light filters into the atrium, brushing across the mosaic floor like a painter testing their palette. You open one eye, then the other. It's quiet, not the quiet of midnight indulgence, but the kind that comes after something is over. Really, truly over. The fire is out. The air is cool. The scent of the feast has faded into something like history, warm, distant, and sweet around the edges. You sit up. Slowly, the cushions sigh beneath you. Your toga is twisted into something that would get you kicked out of a Senate meeting, but no one here minds. You're not in a Senate meeting. You're in a half-lit Roman dining room, surrounded by the faint ghosts of laughter, garlic, and music. One servant still lingers in the corner, folding linens with military precision. He sees you stir and gives the world's tiniest nod, like a librarian who approves of how quietly you woke up. You stretch your arms over your head. Every joint sounds like a creaky door in an old temple. Every breath feels like it's being exhaled by someone centuries older than you. And yet, you feel good. Soft, human, slightly absurd, but good. You look around the room. There's a single fig left on a silver plate, a cup with a dried wine ring, a shoe someone's, not yours, leaning tragically against a bust of Augustus. It's the aftermath of excess, but there's no shame here, just traces, echoes, the friendly kind. And you realize something strange. You're not in a hurry to leave. The world beyond this villa is waiting. You know that, somewhere outside. The city is stretching awake. Bread is being baked. Coins are clinking. Arguments are resuming. But here, this moment, is yours. Your neighbor's older gentleman from earlier turns, somehow already dressed and polished. His hair is wet. His sandals are tied. And he carries 2 cups of something steaming. Barley tea. He says, technically for digestion, spiritually for regret. He hands you a cup. It's warm, earthy. It tastes like someone trying to apologize for feeding you 12 courses of stuffed rodents and candied duck. You sip gratefully. Did you dream? He asks. You pause. I don't know. I think I just floated. He nods. That counts. The host reappears, too, but this time in a simpler tunic. No purple stripes. No theatrical entrance. He looks less like a senator and more like a dad who's trying to walk off his own food hangover. He sees you, smiles faintly, and says, "You stayed till morning. That makes you family." You don't know what to say, so you nod and accept another sip of tea. Most guests leave after the 6th course. He adds, "You made it too. I stopped counting, but I'm pretty sure you saw the peacock moose. So congratulations." You laugh softly. You remember the moose. You remember everything. But Elsa, nothing clearly. The feast isn't a sequence of events anymore. It's a feeling, a warmth, a blur of textures and voices and roasted improbabilities. You run your hand over the tiny emperor charm again. It's still with you, still real. You don't know if you write about this or tell anyone. Some things aren't meant for scrolls. They're meant to live quietly in your bones. A final breeze rolls through the open doorway. A bird chirps like it's rehearsing for something grand. The city waits, but you don't stand up yet. You take one more breath. You look around one more time, and you smile, because if Rome is a feast, then tonight you were fed. You finally rise. Not dramatically, not like a hero returning from conquest, more like someone who's just remembered they have feet. The blanket falls from your shoulders. Your joints creak. Your stomach sighs. You adjust your toga into something vaguely respectable, though no one here expects perfection. You've feasted. You've earned the right to look mildly disheveled. The villa feels different in the early morning light, less like a stage, more like a home. The glamour is gone, but in its place is something, warmer honesty, perhaps, or simply digestion. A servant meets you at the door with a warm cloth for your hands. Another offers you a small roll of bread, plain, simple, placidly unstuffed with anything. You accept it like it's a sacred offering. "Thank you," you murmur. The servant bows, as if you've passed a test you didn't know you were taking. Your sandals are returned to you, polished and neatly arranged by the threshold. You slip them on, feeling gravity settle back into your heels. The courtyard outside is quiet. Dew clings to the laurel leaves. A cat walks along the low wall like it owns the empire, which, for the record, it probably does. The city is waking up in layers. The sweep of brooms, the call of a baker, the creak of wagon wheels echoing down cobbled streets, all of it soft, rhythmic, like the world itself is yearning. You look back at the villa. It seems smaller now, more intimate, like a dream you can still describe, but not entirely explain. Was it real? Yes. Was it ridiculous? Also yes. But that's Rome, a city where you can eat a stuffed dormouse at midnight and discuss Stoic philosophy with someone wearing more gold than a statue. A city where luxury and absurdity hold hands under candlelight. Historians will write about this city in volumes. Scholars will argue about how often dormice were served, whether the mulsum was boiled first or sweetened after, whether the seating order was political or just a matter of cushion quality. But none of them were here, not like you were. They didn't watch a monkey steal a fig. They didn't eat a tart shaped like a fish. They didn't fall asleep under the painted gaze of Bacchus himself. But you did. And as you step back into the morning, you carry all of it with you, not just in your memory, but in your breath, your rhythm, your pace. You're walking slower now, more deliberately, like someone who knows the value of a long meal and a longer pause. The amphora charm in your pocket taps gently against your hip. You don't need to say goodbye, because Rome doesn't end. It lingers, in the warmth of the sun on your face, in the scent of time carried on the wind, in the knowledge that somewhere another feast is already being prepared, and if you're lucky, there might be just one more dormouse left on the tray, waiting for you. So now, traveler, let the memory settle. Let the feast become fog. You are no longer seated in a marble atrium. You are tucked under your own blankets, safe, still, and deeply full of food, of time, of laughter echoing from centuries ago. Let your body rest the way Rome rests between empires, quietly, magnificently. Let your thoughts wander, not to the details, but to the feeling, the soft cushion, the warm cup, the sound of water in the fountain. This night has ended, but its rhythm, its flavor, its softness, they're still with you. So, close your eyes now, breathe a little deeper, let the mosaic fade, let the columns dissolve, let the dormouse dream.